Liz Lamping here, PHRA's Executive Director. Welcome to P4, People, Purpose, Passion, Pittsburgh. P4 is brought to you by our members and sponsors, Latitude and the University of Pittsburgh Executive MBA Programs and Center for Executive Education. We appreciate their support, and we will hear from them throughout the podcast, beginning with the University of Pittsburgh Executive MBA Programs and Center for Executive Education.
Once again, colleagues and friends, and welcome to another edition of the PHRA P4 podcast, People, Purpose, Passion, and Pittsburgh. Many of you hopefully should already know my name is Ron Kubitz. I'm the Director of Recruitment at St. Barnabas Health System and a proud PHRA board member. I also oversee the social media committee for the PHRA. For those of you that have been listening to our podcast regularly, you know that we are continuing to highlight our great team of volunteer board of directors. And today we will meet three more exceptional, and if I want to tie in the P4 moniker, three exceptional people, professionals whose purpose and passion is to make not only their companies and Pittsburgh a greater place to work by utilizing their HR and legal expertise, but also to impact that along with their relationship with the PHRA. So I just want to basically get right to it. Like I said, I have the honor of welcoming, and you'll have the pleasure to listen to three great PHRA Board of Director members here today. First, we would have Caitlin O'Connor. Caitlin is a counsel at Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney. So welcome, Katie. We have Scott Raley. Scott is HR Generalist at the Armco Credit Union. So welcome, Scott.
Hey, guys.
And then last but certainly not least, we have Tabatha Wendorff. Tabatha is a Senior Director of Total Rewards at Springboard Collaborative. So welcome to all three of you. Glad to have you on the podcast today. So as I said, the main goal of the podcast is to really get to know the folks better so that when you see them out and about at events, you're able to go up to them, maybe feel a little bit more comfortable interacting with them. So first thing we like to do is get to know a little bit more about them, both professionally and personally. So we will start with Caitlin. So Caitlin, can you tell us, take a couple minutes, tell us a little bit more about, what you do and who you are and some of the things that you enjoy.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie O'Connor. I am a lawyer at Buchanan. I specialize in employment, litigation, and counseling. I handle all variety of employment-related claims, disability, FMLA, wage and hour, discrimination, you name it. For the most part, I do it or see it. Been in Buchanan for around 5 years now. And how did I get here? It's unfortunately a terribly boring story, but Ron, I too am a very proud Pittsburgher, born and raised in Pittsburgh. I live in Squirrel Hill now. And I can tell you that we had a take your child to work day, or not take your child to work day. We did do that, but we had the, that day in school when you come in and you dress up as what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah.
Okay. So roughly like third grade, fourth grade, around there, I went to school, dress up as what I want to be when I grow up. And the short version is I put on my dad's blazer, walked into school amidst firemen, police officers, all the things that kids want to be. And I told them I'm going to be an employment lawyer. So I don't know. And here I am. And I suppose that makes me rather uninteresting. But that's me. In addition to being a lawyer and doing employment law, I love running, any kind of exercise, spinning, yoga, walking, whatever I can do to get fresh air. Hard to find the time now. I've got two little ones, under 2. And so my life is full of diapers and bottles and not a lot of running, but I'm sure I'll get back to it soon.
Yeah, I remember those days, and I'm not saying I would want to go back again, but I give you credit. You had higher aspirations than me when I was in elementary school. If I remember about the little books we always had to fill out, I wanted to be a gardener, I think, one year, a garbage man one year. So yeah, lawyer, you had much higher aspirations. And I know Squirrel Hill very well. I'm a Alderdice graduate, and I lived in the area myself. So yeah, great area. So thank you for that, Katie. Next, we're going to meet Scott Raley. Scott, you want to share a little bit about, who you are and what makes you tick and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Scott Raley. I am the HR Generalist for Armco Credit Union. I'm a generalist, so I do everything from recruiting to, coming up with, in the worst case scenarios, performance improvement plans. I help with our compensation planning. I help with just kind of strategic initiatives for the company. I love what I do because it's different. It's every day is a different experience for me. And how I got into HR, I really when I went to school, I went to Westminster College in New Wilmington, and I just decided to do business. Just because, hey, you can do everything with a business degree, and ended up focusing on HR. Didn't expect to land in HR, but that's just kind of where my first job took me, and I decided, hey, this is pretty neat. Might as well stick with it here. So I've been enjoying the HR field for a little under 10 years now. I'm a little on the younger side, but in my spare time, I have a band. We are a rock band. We'll do everything from Beatles to Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses. I never know. Maybe one day somebody will let me play at maybe one of our golf and bocce outings or something like that. But aside from that, that's pretty much me.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we'll have to talk with Liz. I'm sure there's something we can do there on the band in the musical front. And it's funny you mentioned how you got in your career. I was at a high school event this week where there's various HR professionals speaking to the students, and that was one of the questions. How you got in HR. And I think there was probably like 7 or 8 HR professionals, including myself. And not one of them, when they were in college, actually had planned in going to HR. It was something that they got into indirectly or, a little bit down the road. So yeah, sadly, I don't think there's too many people that actually come out and say they want to get in our profession. But hey, thanks for sharing, Scott. And then certainly not least, but we have Tabatha who's going to go here. Tabatha, you want to share a little bit about, what makes you tick?
Sure. So Tabatha Wendorff, and I am the Senior Director of Total Rewards at Springboard Collaborative. That's a national nonprofit focused on literacy. But I did start my career in very homegrown roots here in Pittsburgh, and I have done all of the things in HR. I feel like I've done everything from recruiting to performance plans to comp design, kind of like that, as we talked about with the generalist concept. I worked in a nonprofit. And so in nonprofit HR, if you're willing to try it, they're just like, yeah, sure, go for it. Why not? And I'm very excited, really passionate about sort of that comp and the total rewards area, because I think that really helps keep folks engaged with an organization. How did I get to HR? I joke that it was sort of the long and wrong way, but that's okay. I actually started out as a social worker, and I realized that I was not cut out for social work. I actually went to school I have an undergrad in psychology. I got my business degree as my master's. Once I realized that I wanted to be in business and HR side. And so as a social worker, I was like, oh, this is not for me. Realized that there were ways that I could help the helpers, which was being in HR, in nonprofit and social work. And I was able to sort of parlay some of those skills into that, and had a fabulous person who saw my resume, saw those transferable skills, and said, I thought I'd be a great fit, and just kind of took off running from there. When I am not HRing, which is pretty often, I sort of believe that I might have a great idea, while I'm on a plane. So I often am just thinking about HR, but when I'm not doing that, I'm generally traveling. We love to travel. I recently had a small human as well. Very excited about that. And he has been on 7 plane rides so far, and he's not one yet. So we have subscribed to the philosophy, have baby, will travel. And so that is kind of our very exciting what is our next trip? That's usually what we're planning over here when we are not thinking about, what the DOL has just released.
Well, that's great. Hey, no, you have a little one, no, you need to stop, what you enjoy doing. So, and let me ask you, I'll put you on the spot. How many different countries have you been to, if you recall?
19.
Yeah, I knew it was a large number. And, I always enjoy talking with Tabatha, and like myself, on the nonprofit side, we're nonprofit here at St. Barnabas, and one thing I always got from talking to Tabatha, one of the things she always stresses is, we're in human resources, and her goal was always to put the human back in human resources, and that's always impacted me whenever I've look at what I do. Hearing what Tabatha has to say, that's always stuck with me. So good to have you on here as well today, Tabatha. So. Okay, so we've gotten to know Katie, Scott, and Tabatha a little bit better. Now let's get into maybe some of the HR side of the podcast. So what we're going to do, the next question is going to be, and we'll have some good different perspectives here. Let's talk about maybe an HR trend that our guests on the podcast are seeing in the workplace today. So whether it's in their workplace, what they're seeing that their clients are dealing with. So Katie, again, we'll start with you. What's maybe an HR trend that you see is really having a big impact on the workplace these days?
So I think there's two things that are really important that are recent developments, and I think are really going to have a significant impact on most employers. The one is the finalized rules to the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act. That came out rather recently. It's quite a departure from what we are all familiar with. It uses familiar phrases from the ADA, but in structure, very different. And so just by way of example, one of the things that it says is that there are per se or de facto reasonable accommodations that must be provided and must be provided immediately to a pregnant worker, including things like water breaks, meal breaks, a lot of things that feel very common sense. But the critical point is they're per se reasonable. So you're shifting the onus of undue hardship and putting the burden there. And that's one of many things that changes. Documentation requests are different. Employers are going to have to go back through what their forms look like, when and how they ask for information. There are now circumstances where they can't ask for information. The ADA forms, and I know a lot of employers use the same ADA forms for pregnant workers. You might not be able to, depending on what your forms look like. So lots and lots of changes there. And I think that's compliance with those new rules is going to be critical. And if you haven't looked at your forms, looked at your policies, thought about, geez, do we need training around this? Most employers will, and you certainly should. And if you want to work with counsel on it, you can, but at the very least, you take a look at your policies, make sure you're complying. So that's one. And then the other one, and Tabatha, this probably is near and dear to your heart as well, is the change to the salary threshold for the exempt workers. We're getting daily phone calls about this because it is, again, such a major change. And like the final rule to the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act, it is going to be in effect this summer, as soon as this summer. There are a couple legal challenges pending. We'll have to see how they turn out. But the key point is DOL estimates that roughly 3 million or more workers who had been exempt will no longer be considered exempt. And so employers are now grappling with really tough decisions. Do we increase this person's salary? Do we leave them where they are and just make them non-exempt? If we do that, what kind of changes do we have to make? And the answer there is a lot. And I encourage employers to think about that next piece, right? Because everybody has a cell phone these days. Everyone has email. A lot of people have email on their phone, their work email. Well, if you change somebody to non-exempt, you probably need to revisit your policy and tell them that they can't be checking work emails off of work hours, because if they are, arguably it's off the clock work, and an employer could be held liable for that. And I'm sure, as you guys all know, those are significant damages and liability. So I think those are the two things. Lots of new stuff, lots of trends. I'm sure Scott and Tabatha have other things too, but I think those are the most interesting to me right now.
Yeah, definitely very interesting. And the one point you made too that I find interesting, you know, a lot of times in the past when we've had changes to different laws or rules or regulations, we've had a nice little lead in or ramp up time where we could try to transition. But as you mentioned, yeah, in both of these cases, you know, we might only have a couple months to really get everything in order, to get everything in line. So we're kind of under the gun, and you know, as HR, definitely will hit the top of our plates, and we hopefully we have the backing of our companies, and as we work to get these implemented and get it done correctly. So yeah, I certainly appreciate those are excellent points. So Scott, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, for us, one of the biggest things that we're starting to see trending is the trend of experience versus skill-based hiring. So a lot of a lot of the kids these days, when they see the cost of tuition for schools, a lot of people aren't going for the 4-year degrees, or maybe they're stopping at the associate's degree level and that kind of thing. But a lot of our positions, you know, we had to reevaluate. They used to be, you know, it was just a hard cutoff at 4-year degree. And if you didn't meet that, I'm sorry, we can't even talk to you. And now it's a little bit more, you know, let's talk about all the skills you've acquired, you know, while you've been here and in your previous life. Maybe this isn't something that we need to uphold quite as much. Certainly we have a lot of people in our credit union. They started from the bottom and they've worked their way up as high as they can go. And so to their credit, you know, they've learned everything that they possibly can to prepare them for the next role. Sometimes with a degree, you can get a little bit more of an indication of their capacity, or you know, just their leadership skills, things of that nature. But those are things that we're trying to tackle now in terms of, you know, can we prepare somebody better for leadership outside of schooling? So that's kind of what's impacting the credit union right now.
Yeah, great points. And we see that obviously here at my employer, St. Barnabas, where a lot of jobs that used to require, whether it be associate degree or a 4-year college degree, now people, like you said, can work their way up through the ranks and get to that level with their experience without having to really get, you know, further formal education. So yeah, the flexibility definitely has to be there. It's definitely a win-win either way you go, but you're not forced to have to spend all that extra money in a lot of cases for that formal education. So
Right.
I appreciate that. Tabatha, what are you seeing out there, especially maybe in the nonprofit world?
So absolutely, Katie was right. Near and dear to my heart for sure is the FLSA changes. What's really interesting for us is we're not really concerned about meeting the minimums, but how does that impact compression, right? As you're doing that, it's moving up everybody's pay bands, everybody's scales, and kind of really looking at how do I make this make sense fiscally, especially in a nonprofit, right? We want to put as much towards the mission as possible, but we also know that if we don't have great talent, then that mission's not getting delivered. So how do we balance that? Huge topics of conversation that have been coming up. Outside of that, more when I do some of my consulting, and this may be a product of my current life situation, but I've answered a lot of questions around the Pump Act, and we're providing reasonable pumping and breastfeeding kind of areas for staff. I've been flabbergasted at the number of folks who don't realize they're required to, don't realize what those needs are. And so that's been a really interesting kind of foray for me. It's a fairly new rule, not as new as our FLSA or the new pregnancy fairness pieces that are coming out, but definitely something that folks were not aware of. And so that's been a very interesting journey. I'm kind of explaining how we can meet those accommodations. It was really interesting because it's actually work I've been doing way before this. I remember creating a pumping and breastfeeding room, I think when I was at Goodwill probably 10 years ago. So love being on the cutting edge of it, but also love being able to help folks kind of advocate for what they need and also make sure that companies are compliant in that.
That's great. Great point. Because certainly, you want to keep the people in the work force, in the workplace, so you want them to feel comfortable knowing they can come to work and balance both sides, motherhood and obviously still having and maintaining that role and trying to make them, again, get it as accommodating as you can. And yeah, knowing you, Tabatha, you're ahead of the curve on most things. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. So great points. I'm just going to throw in one just for a future reference. One of the things that I'm seeing is artificial intelligence. I kind of liken it to 5 or 10 years ago when everybody was talking about, social media. Let's use social media. And then, of course, from the legal perspective, the pros and cons. I know hopefully many of our listeners are familiar with the PHRA Perspectives, which is the newsletter that comes out every other month. I know in this past one, Katie has an excellent article in there on artificial intelligence and from the legal perspective. And then I also have one in there on how HR can use artificial intelligence. I know Katie has had some webinars on that as well too. So that's something that I see as coming down the road. Maybe it's going to replace a lot of the social media discussion. It'll be the use of artificial intelligence in our HR world. So I think that's something that, as Tabatha says, is we're on the cusp of now. That's going to get even more important over the years. So appreciate that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So well, we're going to wrap things up with one final question on the podcast today. And for those that have listened to the podcast that I've hosted in the past before, I always tell the story of how if I wasn't in HR and recruiting, I would like to either be a stand-up comedian or be a villain in a soap opera. I'm still holding out hope, even at my old age. Maybe that might happen. But so I always like to ask, if you weren't, counsel at a legal firm, if you weren't in HR, what would you like to be doing? What would be maybe your fantasy career, or what might you be doing? So, Katie, again, we'll start with you.
I might have two. Maybe I could do them at the same time. I'd love to be a yoga instructor or like a spin instructor, some kind of fitness instructor. That seems like it would be a really great job and like really make people feel good. Yeah, you see people at their best, yeah, definitely. So I think that'd be great. I do love kids, and I think doing something with like early childhood education, I have so much respect for educators. And so I'd really like to do that. And I sort of am looking for ways to be able to do it, perhaps, without the formal training, but maybe in informal ways.
Always have exercise classes for the kids. So yeah, they would enjoy that. So as long as I don't have to do it. No.
Yeah, right.
Scott, how about yourself?
Yeah, as a musician, it kind of just makes sense. I'd love to be a full-time musician if it weren't so terrible odds of hitting it big as a musician. So maybe it's better to say I'd love to go into like audio engineering or audio recording, where I can still work with music and work with other musicians and things of that nature. I just love all that stuff.
Now, by chance, are you going to be, the PHRA has a networking event next week at the Hardwood in the Butler area. Are you going to be there?
Yeah, I actually helped organize it, and I'm from the Butler area.
Mhm.
That's where I was born and raised, and so I'm looking forward, if there are anybody out there in the Butler area that are looking to get connected more with the PHRA. We do have, presence in Butler. We absorbed the Butler HR Association last year, and that included the Mercer and Lawrence County areas as well. So we definitely have the ability. It's not just the city of Pittsburgh. We definitely have the ability to reach outwards.
Great. And I work in Gibsonia. I will look forward to seeing you there in person. I will be there along with many of my crew. But yeah, I'll have to talk with Liz. If we would have known some of this in advance, we could have maybe had, set up a little stage. You could have performed at the event there if they would let you. But yeah, maybe down the road. Tabatha, I'm almost afraid to ask you this question, knowing you, but what would be maybe your, other career or fantasy career?
Honestly, I think, knowing what I know now, if you would have asked me this when I was 12, there was not such a thing as a travel influence blogger, but that would be amazing. If I could just go and, review hotels all day, I would be super excited. There's a woman I follow called Vegas Starfish. Literally, she's just stayed at every hotel in Vegas. How could that go wrong? And then if I was not doing that, honestly, I was Katie when I was little. I told everyone I was going to be a lawyer. I probably would be doing this just in a different capacity, probably on her side. But kind of to go back to flag what Scott said, I looked at what my bill would be for attending law school and had a panic attack, and so that's why I didn't go there. So until they get the apprenticeships back in law, which I think Michigan was like the last state who got rid of that in the 90s, I'm going to be hanging out in the HR office for a while.
Well, great. And again, I certainly appreciate Katie, Scott, Tabatha taking some time to chat today and getting to know you better. Thanks to the PHRA for allowing us to do these podcasts, and I hope our listening audience finds them enjoyable. Again, thanks to Katie, thanks to Scott, thanks to Tabatha. Look forward to seeing you at an upcoming event, and hopefully see many of you that are listening to this at an upcoming PHRA event. So for now, until the next podcast, thank you very much, and appreciate the time. Thank you.
People do matter. And at the end of the day, we cannot get any work done if we don't have the right people in place. Are your people connected? Latitude is the one-stop shop people connection software platform. Our software workshops and programming facilitate new employee onboarding, manager one-on-ones, stay interviews, mentorship programs, and peer networking to increase retention, engagement, satisfaction, productivity, profitability, and happiness. Imagine a technology that intersects your calendar with LinkedIn, Zoom, Google Docs, and your CRM. Contact Latitude today to schedule a conversation.
The PHRA P4 podcast was created to help build HR leaders through discussions with thought and business leaders on the most critical success factor of any business, its people. If you enjoy an episode, please help us spread the word by subscribing to the podcast and providing us a rating. We would love for you to take a screenshot of the episode, tag PHRA, and share it with your followers. Until next time, thank you